Hello, this is David Simms from Talanton here with Jon Halverson and Michelle Ochiang also joining us. We like to start every meeting in prayer, so if you don't mind, let me just give a brief prayer for our time together today. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for just the way you're moving in East Africa. Thank you for the many people that are part of the network of Talanton supporters, the investors that are making this work possible. We thank you for just the encouragement that we see as we get a chance to see the number of jobs that are being created, the businesses flourishing, the revenues and profits being generated, all the pieces coming together. And we thank you now for this time together. Pray that you'd give us your wisdom about knowing how best to move forward. We thank you for this in Jesus' name. So again, today, we're going to be talking about the Talanton Momentum Fund, impact investing in Africa. Most of you have been part of this journey for a while, some of you for 5 or 6 years, the full length of time that we've been in business as Talanton. And what we want to do is make sure that we have a chance to give you a highlight of what's going on and why we're excited to be launching this new fund, the Momentum Fund. I need to give you the normal disclosures. None of this is investment advice. Talk to your investment advisor, and we're happy to have you guys participating, but the appropriate disclosures are here in this slide. We started this fund and this ministry in order to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And we're using Matthew 25 as the biblical basis for what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that we're investing wisely to multiply those talents, but also to make sure that we're doing it, investing in the right kind of businesses with the right kind of outcome and faithful servant. We think that we're well positioned to do this because at this point we have a proven track record, more than 6 years of operation for Talanton, significant capital raised, over 34 million now raised, and expansive reach. We have 17 companies in the existing portfolio, and number 18 should enter within the next month. So it's all in the final legal stages of crossing T's, dotting I's to have number 18 join us. What do we seek to do? We seek to bring joy to wise investors who want to be faithful stewards of their capital. Those wise investors putting impact-seeking capital, that's triple bottom line capital, spiritual, social, and financial returns that we want to put into values-aligned growth stage job-creating businesses. Let that capital recycle, and then you as investors have a chance to redeem that capital in the impact fund anytime after 4 years. So it's a unique model that we've created. The Momentum Fund, what we're here to talk about, really has been designed and just launched in January, the fundraising phase of this, for us to turbocharge the growth and impact that we're seeing across Africa in both the companies that we've already invested in and the new ones that are coming across our plate that may become first-time equity investments for us. These companies really need equity capital given the aggressive pace of growth that they're seeing. And we've been able to help with debt capital, but we haven't been able to help much with equity capital in the existing fund. And we really wanted to do that in order to empower talented Africans with meaningful work and provide attractive returns for our investors. This is a limited opportunity. We're trying to raise $20 million of equity capital to fuel this growth, an 8% preferred return to all investors, and targeting a higher return in total, something that may be 12% or more. Again, nothing promised, but at least the 8% is preferred. 100% of all of the first returns go back to our investor. It's a 10-year fund with a 3-year investment window, and we're looking for anybody to be able to invest at least $100,000 as a straight investment. Or again, our donor advised fund organization partners are also keenly interested in helping us. Generally, those have $25,000 minimums. Happy to talk through any of these issues when we get to the question phase. Jon, let me turn it over to you to have you share a little bit about the framing of what we're doing in the Momentum Fund at a
wonderful
company level.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for taking time. I know you're busy, and it's our joy to talk about this. So we hope you can celebrate that with us. So the context for the Momentum Fund was really born out of the Impact Fund. And And it was a natural kind of step towards what we call mission fulfillment or moving to the next level of impact. We know these first 4 or 5 investments extremely well. They'll come right out of these 17 investments. I'm going to highlight 5 of them here in a minute. Odds are that if you've been an investor in Talanton, you've probably heard of some of these companies because we've been on a journey with them. We have trust-based relationships with the founders and CEOs and management teams. Many of them are getting mentoring from Talanton partners or Talanton staff, and many of them join our CEO per call that we had earlier this week. It's a great way to launch a new fund with at least 4 or 5 businesses that we already know extremely well. So go to the next slide. First one I'll highlight is Kentegra. This is a business that works with over 30,000 smallholder farmers on contract, and they grow flowers, beautiful flowers. And out of that flower comes a product called Pyrethrum refined extract. And it's a wonderful product that's efficacious pesticide for organic farming. And it's sold worldwide. And the organic food and farming growth is about 9 to 11% CAGR. So it's a wonderful market that's still growing. And Kentegra is uniquely positioned to meet that growing demand. We put $3.5 million into this business, starting with the first tranche in 2020 when they were at $300,000 in sales. In 2024, they went over $8 million in sales. And this business is fast growing and has significant impact in the process. They're only at less than 5% of the global market share. So this is a very significant upside, which is one reason they're a strong candidate for Momentum Fund. So this is a great story. Behind Mary, the farmer here, is Pyrethrum flowers. And David and I were there with a group of our investors. We do an annual insight trip to really make sure our investors can experience firsthand our portfolio businesses and the impact. And we visited Mary's farm, and she told us about the journey of getting into Pyrethrum and the difference it's made in her life. Before she got into farming Pyrethrum, she would often have to farm out her labor to neighbors to make ends meet. So she was a laborer for other smallholder farmers on the very low end of the spectrum of income. And when she got into Pyrethrum, it really began to transform her life. She went from a net really taker to a net giver. We asked her, what have you done with this extra money that you're making from Pyrethrum farming? And the first words out of her mouth were, I'm going to support my local church. She said, before I just attended, I always felt guilty. I had nothing to give. And now I have something to give. So you see where her heart is, her wonderful heart of giving back to her community and to her church as a result of this income. That's her mom there. They were very proud to have us there and to show us the farm. And some of her kids are actually attending university. It just goes to show what can happen in these families when they get the resources to do these sort of things. So this is a business, Moko Home and Living, that many refer to as the IKEA of East Africa. We've put in about $3 million starting in 2021. It's definitely one of the higher performers in our portfolio. When we got in, they were less than $3 million in sales. In 2024, they're at 9.6 million, almost 10 million in sales. But here's what's really exciting. Over 400 direct jobs, over 250 local artisanal suppliers of various things that go into their furniture. You're looking at mattresses. They also do a whole line of beautiful furniture. You look at their website when you have a minute, Moko Home and Living Kenya, and you'll see that. So this is a business that also has huge market potential, and they're in need of about 3 to 5 million of equity to meet that potential. So they're only just beginning to penetrate the size of the furniture and mattress market in Africa, and they do have regional and Pan-African aspirations. This is a business we're delighted to be a part of and look forward to going to the next level with Momentum Fund. Earn. This is a really amazing business, 35 million in sales. We put 3 million in 2 tranches starting in late 2022, much of it debt, and they haven't missed a quarterly payment the entire journey. What's exciting is not only the over 2,000 people employed, especially when you include their suppliers and distributors, it goes up in the tens of thousands that are actually employed or supporting the livelihoods of people associated with this business. But what's also really great is the product itself is beneficial. When we look at businesses during due diligence, we look at jobs, number one. We look at the quality of the leaders, number one, as well, and the character of the leaders. But we also looked at the product and service. Is it something beneficial? Burn has these super efficient cook stoves that dramatically reduce harmful smoke emissions. And what this does is it improves human health on a grand scale. There's still over 600 million people in Africa that routinely use these cook stoves. So it's a big cultural and impact opportunity and market opportunity. This has a significant carbon credit generator, which is also part of the return model that Talanton is participating in. POA Internet, this is a business we visited in early February with a bunch of our investors. It's a really an amazing technology that allows affordable broadband to connect to the low-income urban communities at scale. We put 3 million in. This business is just starting to hit the gas pedal. They've cracked the nut on a business model. They had over 60,000 customers in 2024, and they're already projecting in their budget to have 120,000 customers in 2025. So they'll double in size this year. And the reason they can do that is because of financing from folks like Talanton. But to go fulfill the market potential, which is far beyond 10x where they currently are situated, they're going to need that equity that the Momentum Fund can provide. This is a high impact business. What we learned when we were visiting is that many of the customers, the beneficiaries of this product, use affordable broadband to run small businesses or to enhance their business. Imagine trying to live your life without any sort of Wi-Fi connection that's reliable or even available. So this really does transform lives. It allows education to come into the homes, but it allows small businesses to thrive, and it allows families to stay connected to news and everything else. This is one that's a strong candidate for the Momentum Fund. Next, this is an ARC ride, and that motorbike you see on the lower picture there is what they make. They manufacture those in Nairobi, and that's part of their business model. Another significant part of their business model is what's called battery as a service. You see this gentleman in that picture. He's actually exchanging a battery for another battery. And there's actually a solar charger on top of that helps re-energize those batteries. So this is a very high impact business. There's over 10,000 motorbike riders in Nairobi alone. When you go regionally, it's in the hundreds of thousands. And petrol is not only very bad for the environment in these cities, it just clogs up the air, but it's also quite dangerous with the gas powered engines. A lot of burns from the engines and from the exhaust pipes. Electric is a lot safer, and it actually helps reduce the cost per kilometer by 40%. Many of these riders actually turn these bikes into businesses. They distribute things, they do supply chain services, taxi services, and they buy the bikes over time. And they partnered with folks like Uber and Green Wheels to really begin to scale this. And it's a great replacement business for Chinese imports. We think this business has $50 to $100 million in sales potential down the road, but we're ready to actually strongly consider this one for one of the first investments for the Momentum Fund. Next
John,
slide.
I think it's 1 million fuel bodabodas in Nairobi today. So it's penetrating EVs, electric vehicles, into a fuel vehicle marketplace is the business model that ArcRide is pursuing.
David, over to you.
For those of you that have been around for a while, you know that we focus on jobs because, as the president of the World Bank said a year ago, creating jobs is the surest way to combat poverty and grow prosperity. A job is the most meaningful yardstick of success for any individual. With a job comes dignity, pride, and the ability to provide for yourself and your family. And we think that the best way that we can fulfill Matthew 25 to serve the least of these is to help create jobs and allow people to work themselves out of poverty. And why do we focus in the kinds of companies that John just reviewed? The missing middle is the answer. That in the capital stack of capital availability, the big multinational corporations, of course, have access to capital globally. The big companies, the large enterprises have access, as do the micro enterprises that have been developed with financing models that I know well from my own career of 30 years spent working and leading Opportunity International. But the missing middle, the companies that are in between the micro and the large enterprises, are the kinds of companies that John just reviewed, and they don't have easy access for capital. And why also do we want to focus on those kind of companies? Because that's where jobs get created. 70% of all new jobs are created by that SME level of business. And without getting capital into the hands of values aligned entrepreneurs right there, we're not going to see those jobs being created. And then why Africa? Principally because the need for jobs in Africa is enormous. In the next decade, 450 million young adults in sub-Saharan Africa will enter the job market. They are alive today, kids 18 years old and younger, and they need jobs. The World Bank tells us only 100 million jobs are likely to be created if things don't change. That would leave 350 million people living without hope, in despair, at risk for human trafficking and flight and poverty and refugees and all the negative things that happen with poverty. And that's not the way we think Africa should live. And it doesn't need to, because guess what? The population also is a huge economic engine. The huge potential in Africa, if you look at the map, most Americans that I talk to have no idea that the United States, China, all of India, all of Western Europe fits inside of Africa as a landmass. And also, most people don't realize the huge economic potential that is Africa, that 7 of the most resilient economies in the world during the COVID area were there. And on this chart, that 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are also in Africa, including Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, the top 3 places where we've chosen to invest Talanton to try and make sure that we're serving in places where there's a need for jobs and there's a huge opportunity because of the economic engine that is happening in those countries.
Yeah.
John, over to you.
Yeah, David, thanks. I just want to highlight some of the things that were features of our first fund, the Impact Fund. And I want to make sure we communicate that fund remains open. It's an evergreen fund, and it serves a wonderful purpose. And our board and our investment committee and our team all said, we've got to keep this going. So we're doing that while we launch the Momentum Fund. So the two will be side by side and very complementary. One thing that's really important also is to know is that the impact profile and goals remain the same for both funds. That's good jobs, mentoring and discipling leaders, which we actively do and seek to do always. And then environmental and social benefits that we do measure. And we have an impact report coming out in the second quarter this year if you want a copy of that. So values-driven leaders is at the top of our list and will continue in the Momentum Fund. The first fund, as you'll see here, is mainly a debt fund. So it only has a 4-year lock. And we're actively still pursuing the 8% return net of all fees and costs in this first fund. I will say this, that we've been very conservative on valuations. We work with a world-class valuation firm and RSM, our auditor, and we always tend to lean towards conservative valuations. We see significant upside in the fund, and also with Momentum, we really want to capture that and make sure we don't miss it for our investor community. What's exciting here is we're supporting over 80,000 jobs. So this is a fun chart to talk about. Just under 4,000 full-time jobs, 5,000 part-time jobs. And when you look at the impact these businesses are having, when you look at supply chains, when you look at businesses like POA and Arkride that have a product that actually creates entrepreneurs and supports entrepreneurs, all of that is legitimate impact that's scalable and sustainable because it's in the context of a business model, not a traditional donor supported organization, but an investment that helps these businesses get to positive cash flow and scale. I will say this, that the part-time jobs in this context are really important in these communities. There's a whole group of people, a large one, in any African city that needs part-time jobs throughout the year to get by. So what we always do with these part-time jobs is look at what is the companies doing for these folks? Are they providing benefits? Are they treating them with respect and dignity and fair pay? Often these part-time jobs are not in that category. In our business is a really important part of how we look and measure impact. The other thing I'll highlight too is that many of our businesses, the 5 I highlighted in particular, create jobs that are very hard to find in Nairobi and in the African context. Kentegra has, I heard just last week, 60 engineers on staff. All but 2 of them are Kenyans. So it just goes to underscore that there's a lot of talent that I would call underemployed. And one of our goals is getting them up to their giftedness and getting the meaningful work that meets their abilities and skills and training. And that's also a really important part of how we look at jobs and impact.
This chart really was just designed to lay out the similarities and differences between the Impact Fund and the Momentum Fund. As John has said, we're in both funds looking to create jobs to allow people to work their way out of poverty, but there's a little bit of difference. The Impact Fund is missing middle businesses and it's debt capital, and the Momentum Fund is equity capital for scaling the businesses that have gotten a little bit bigger. They're still missing middle because they can't get equity capital easily, but it's to provide equity returns. The Impact Fund has a 4-year redemption option, and a Momentum Fund will be a 10-year fund. That doesn't mean that it's going to be 10 years before you get your money back. The goal is to actually invest and get all of the money flowing back inside of 10 years. But if there's an exit at year 5, that money will start to flow back in year 5, as I think most of you probably understand. Job creation is a focus of both, but on smaller companies in the Impact Fund, and then accelerating job growth and societal impact in the Momentum Fund. And really, the unique value of bridging the unique capital needs of underserved businesses for the Impact Fund, and then fueling those and some new to us businesses in the Momentum Fund. But largely, the Momentum Fund is going to be focused on the 4 or 5, maybe as many as 6 companies that are in the Impact Fund that need equity capital. It's not available really at the scale they need through the Impact Fund. We believe we have an absolutely superb team. John and I have the joy of working with a whole host of Africans sitting in Nairobi, as well as Michelle sitting in Baltimore. So we have a host of Africans helping us with this, a strong team that helps in finance and marketing and supporting us in what we're doing, including the due diligence that's so necessary and the post-investment support that is essential to the work that we do at Talanton. We have to support the companies after we make the investment. It's not write a check and walk away. It's write a check and then really start work. That's the way it works for Talanton.
Let me highlight one thing on that last slide that's super important.
Sure.
We have 4 Kenyans on staff now, and 3 of them are in Nairobi. We're about to hire 2 more. So what's really been a fun development at Talanton is a strong regional team that really helps with sourcing new deals and doing post-investment support and getting things over the goal line. This is, in my view, one of the key reasons that Momentum Fund is timely, because now that we have this team, it allows us to take a look at this second fund and give it the time and energy it needs. And soon to have 5, maybe 6, David, in the Nairobi office?
In Nairobi. Yep.
Finance.
It's really the headquarters for Talanton is in Nairobi. We've been supported since the very beginning with a superstar group of people on our advisory board. Several of these folks, Dave Tomey, Hervé Sarto, and Christian Hilliard, also serve on our investment committee. Hervé chairs that investment committee, and both Hervé and Dave come from deep, significant private equity firms, both being in the CEO jobs for those 2 funds. And so we benefit from their wisdom. And Christian's been a phenomenal entrepreneur and understands what it takes to grow and scale businesses. And he also is adding lots of value for us, in addition to their value as ongoing board members for Talanton. There are multiple ways in which you can invest in Talanton, and that's everything from conventional investments, IRAs, private foundations, program-related investments, or investment from donor-advised funds. All of these are also true in the Momentum Fund. We're setting things up. Not everything's across the line with every one of the DAF providers, but we're getting there. And so reach out, let us know if you have a particular desire to invest out of one channel, because frequently it takes someone that's a client of one of the firms in order to get us invested on that platform. So we're happy to work with you on whatever channel is best for you. We have 2 funds, but there's one big, wholly audacious goal, and you'll see that on the right-hand side. We're trying to see if we can't hit at least 250,000 jobs created or supported by the end of this decade. I personally think it can be a lot bigger number than that, but we'd love to see what, with your help, the Lord would provide. For this year, we're trying to move that number from 83,000 to north of 100,000 in 2025, because we'd love to launch this Momentum Fund as quickly as we can, perhaps as early as by the second quarter of this year, as we seek to raise the initial $7.5 million that would allow us to launch the fund in 2025 here. In order to do that, we're hoping that you and others will find a place on our patron community fundraising pyramid toward the $20 million goal that we've set. That's anything from $250,000 investments up to $2 million. Smaller investments are also welcome. We just love to find a way that we can work with you and what you're trying to do to have you continue to be part of this journey for us and let us go support the kind of companies that John described earlier in this presentation. And again, it's for us all about hearing, well done, good and faithful servant. And I'm just going to end with, we'll send this deck out. When we send it out, you'll see a little video there from Ben Carlson of Long Miles Coffee. His video is not showing on my screen right now. But Ben, in the program that he ran this summer, it was a vacation Bible school run by Long Miles Coffee. They call it a coffee camp, but they had 9,300 kids that all got books for their school uniforms. So when people ask what's different about a values-based faith-driven investment fund, most PE funds are not going out to invest in companies that are putting 9,300 kids in vacation Bible schools or working in a community where the government came in and reported a 95% decrease in teenage pregnancies because of the work of Long Miles, largely in that community, to make a difference, bring hope, get the kids in school, and help them be better students with hope for a brighter future. That's what our investors are investing in. Thank you for all of you that are already investors. But let me now see if we can't turn over to you to ask, let Michelle weigh in with what questions do you have? Michelle, over to you.
David, Jon, thank you so much. Thank you for taking us through that deck. There are a couple of good questions that have come in, so allow me to just dive right in. First one is this: what probable liquidity events do you see in the 10 years of the fund life? What exit options will exist for any investments held at the fund's end of life?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, David. We've obviously given that a lot of thought, and we've even some experience in our first fund. Yeah, with what's happening in Africa is that it's becoming a very strategic continent for certainly the Fortune 200 companies, if not even Fortune 400 companies. I have a friend who was a senior partner at McKinsey, and yeah, he told me that from about 2005, the fastest growing practice area at McKinsey was Africa strategies for multinational companies. It's got 60% of the world's undeveloped agriculture arable land, 30% of the world's minerals. It's got significant oil and gas. And that's just naming a few of the resources. David showed that huge geography. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And the world needs it. As the world goes to 9 billion people, there's a demand pull in Africa, and you can feel it when you're in the urban cities, cranes everywhere, development happening. So when you look at these kind of businesses in the Momentum Fund, when we take them from 10 million in sales to 20 or 30 or 40 million in sales, that's where they become targets for good, ethical, sound companies, multinationals, also larger private equity, IPOs. The liquidity options start to go through the roof. Some of our businesses are already getting calls now from strategics. I'm on the board of these, so we talk about those. And the idea here is to help them scale the impact and meet their potential as what we call societal impact businesses before they have that liquidity event. But the continent's changing. The perception 10, 15 years ago was that liquidity was really hard, and that was probably true, but it's changing. So it's something we've factored. We actually, in due diligence, is a key part of our investment committee decision-making, is what are the options and when do you think this could happen and who would the likely candidates be? I'll answer it that way. David, do you have anything to add? Or?
Yeah, I'm just going to answer one other thing. The question comes up a lot. Can you get your money back from Africa? And one of the ways that I like to answer it in our current fund is that we already do. We brought 2.5 million or so back into the fund that were debt repayments coming back every single quarter and annual revenue shares coming back at the end of the year from many of the companies that we use a revenue share as part of our investment vehicle. So we brought that money back and we've reinvested it. That's what we try to do through the impact fund. But we think that cash flow and the inherent strength of the businesses are going to give us a great opportunity for them to see exits on the equity side as well. And one of the companies already has set up an ESOP. And I personally, quite frankly, I'm hoping that we can help some of these other companies explore ESOPs as a way that they can also provide exits for our equity investor community. In part, obviously, we'd like to see the exits for our investors, but in part, we'd love to say, how do we get the equity ownership in the hands of more Africans, that they participate in the ownership of the companies that the employees are helping to create that value and drive the growth of those companies. So it's an option that is nascent in Africa, but it exists. So just one more idea there.
Thanks, David. And definitely one that I'd like to see a lot more of across the continent. Another question here. Could you differentiate between the capital call structure for the Momentum Fund versus the Impact Fund?
Yeah, great question. Impact Fund generally, people have made the commitments and sent the checks in, and we've managed to, in the last year, rapidly deploy the funds that come in. We started the year last year with 10 million of cash available, and now we will, by the end of this next investment, have committed 14.5 million. So you can see that we needed the extra money to come in early this year in order to make sure that the cash came in and the cash went out pretty quickly. And pretty consistently, we're now able to make sure that any cash commitment to the Impact Fund is actually going to be invested within the next 6 to 9 months. That's going to be very standard. Momentum Fund is different. We're trying to raise 20 million. You saw that on the charts. That's committed capital. Once we reach 7.5 million, we'll have what's called a first close. That will allow us to open the fund, but it's called a first close, in order to make our first investments. When we're prepared to make that first investment, we'll open the fund, we'll have that first call, and we'll make that first investment. But we'll only call the amount of money that we need to fulfill that investment and running the fund. That's all that we'll call up front. When we're ready to make the second investment, we'll have another capital call. It will be to fund that second investment. Now, we may know that we're going to do 1 or 2 or 3 investments in a pretty back-to-back basis, given the companies that we know so well. So we may do a capital call that is bigger in order to allow us to fund multiple companies within a quarter, let's say. And that's the way that this will go. Because of the strength of the companies that we're talking about that John's already shared with you today, we believe that we'll be able to pretty rapidly invest the funds wisely. We've given ourselves 3 years to invest after the first close. And we think that we should be able to do that within 2 years, in my opinion, but we've given ourselves 3 years because we may have some new companies that join us in the Momentum Fund, in addition to the 4 or 5 or 6 that may be investments coming out of our current Impact Fund portfolio that now need equity more than they need debt.
I'll add one quick thing, and that's we have this really organized data room. And we have some investors now that are actively doing due diligence, and both funds have a lot of nice summaries in there, including the full PPMs, but also portfolio reviews, per company analysis. If you really are looking at having a team or yourself want to dig deep into our funds, that's an avenue where just let us know. There's an NDA, and then you can have access to that data room.
Thanks, John. Good point.
Another good question here. How often will you provide an update to investors, reporting, of course, on both the financial performance and impact metrics?
Michelle, I think you should answer that question because you deal with all of our investors so well in providing the report. So I'm going to turn that question right back to why don't you answer that for us?
For the Impact Fund, we, of course, run a quarterly report that we send back both on an impact basis and as well as the quarterly NAV, net asset valuation that we run. So I imagine that for the Momentum Fund, we will use the same format and then be able to give a report back to the investors on a timely basis. I'm not sure it's going to be every quarter, but that's something that we could discuss with the team and then get back to the investors on. But you can definitely expect to either hear from me, myself, or get an update using the fund administrative platform that we use that will then be highlighting these metrics and numbers for you investors to then, of course, be able to follow along and see what's happening with the investments in Africa.
Yeah, and I think what Michelle said is right. We're likely to still do quarterly reports in terms of updates of what's happening at the company level. So we'll be sharing quarterly the social spiritual updates that are part of our investor briefings today. We don't expect to do quarterly NAVs per se in the Momentum Fund, but we may do a NAV twice a year so that you'd get an estimate of how the fund is performing. And then you'll start getting returns back into your accounts when there are exits. So, of course, you'll start seeing how the fund is performing in actual, not just paper appreciation of your returns over time.
Thanks, David. Okay, in the interest of time, I think we have just about time for one more. How accessible is equity capital from other investors, given the success of these businesses already?
John, you're sitting on a bunch of these boards. You could talk about how hard it is.
Yeah. When we did the Insight trip, we visited, I think, all 5 of these companies I highlighted today. And we heard the same thing, that even though they've gotten to a larger size and have a growing track record, it's still very difficult to get the capital they need, and which is one of the kind of demand pulls for the Momentum Fund, is that we still consider it a missing middle. There are co-investors. We actually really love when we find a values-aligned co-investor, and then we share kind of some of the load of post-investment support and strategy and boards and everything else. And we have some of those, and they're out there, but it's not easy. I'll put it that way. And 2 of our businesses are actively raising funds now, and we're hoping to be a part of that fundraise through Momentum Fund. And both of them have a pretty important need to get that capital to really be able to achieve their growth goals over the next 2-3 years. But it's a heavy lift to raise capital anywhere in the world, and especially when you're a mid-sized business in Africa.
Yeah, I had breakfast this week with 2 CEOs of investors of ours that are running private equity funds, and they both told me in the U.S. how difficult it is right now to raise funds, equity funds. And so, if you can imagine trying to raise funds in Africa without deep networks, it's really difficult for most of these companies to be able to do so. It's why our investor community is so valuable to advancing the kingdom work here. It really is meeting an essential need to see the kind of impact that's happening in these companies. So with that, we'll thank you for joining us. Hopefully you already have my emails, John's or Michelle's. You're welcome to reach out to any of us or Desiree, who helps us out with all of our marketing as well. We'd be delighted to follow up, answer any other questions, or give you access to the data room, or provide any other information that would be helpful to allow you to make a decision. And hopefully you can see yourself in one of those boxes on the pyramid, or that you'll be able to help us advance what it is that we think the Lord's calling us to do in Africa. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And John, any last words from you?
I see many of our existing investors are on the call that are also exploring Momentum. And we have an upcoming investor prayer call, and we've been doing these now, and there's always about 8 to 12, 15 investors on. They've been rich times of sharing, updating a little bit from prayer requests. You get a little bit deeper look into what's happening from a prayer perspective to our portfolio companies. If you can join one of those prayer calls, we'd love it's our joy to do that together with you. So if you haven't heard from us about it, let me know, and we'll make sure you get the invite. And we're right on time. So well done, Michelle and David.
Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your afternoon.